Most people go into buying a home asking what sounds like the smartest question: what's the best loan? And I get why that's the question, because that's what everyone around you is talking about. FHA versus conventional, interest rates, how much down, what your payment is. That's what the conversation usually revolves around. But here's the problem: the question doesn't actually determine whether you've made a good decision or not. And this is where I see people, even smart people, get it wrong all the time. Because I've worked with buyers who got a great rate and still felt stuck, put a lot of money down and regretted it later, even paid cash and ended up in a worse financial position than they expected. And at the same time, I've worked with buyers who kept their cash, structured things differently, didn't chase the lowest payment, and they ended up with more flexibility, more options, and a stronger position overall. So clearly, it's not just about the loan. And if it's not about the loan, then what actually matters? The real question you should be asking is, what position do I want to be in after I buy this house? Because that one question changes everything. And if you're in that phase right now where you're trying to figure out, should I put more money down? Should I keep my cash? What actually makes sense for me? There is a link in my description. I'll run the numbers based on your situation and walk you through it. As always, no pressure, just clarity. In the simplest way possible, you are not just buying a house. You are making a capital allocation decision. That's it. That's the entire game. And once you start looking at it that way, everything starts to make more sense. Because now, instead of thinking, how much house can I buy? You start thinking, what is my money doing after I buy this? Where is it going? What is it doing? And what am I giving up by using it here? Because every dollar you put into a home is a dollar that is no longer available to you somewhere else. And most buyers never actually slow down and think about that. They just default to, this is what people usually do. This is what my lender said. This is what feels safe. But safe doesn't always mean optimal. And that's the difference between making a purchase versus making a strategy decision. Let's talk about the biggest trap that I see: people optimizing for monthly payments. And I understand why. The payment is real. It hits your bank account every single month. So naturally, people think, if I can get this number lower, I'm making a better decision. But here's the issue: a lower payment is not free. You don't just magically get a lower payment. You have to do something to get there. You either put more money down, buy down your rate, stretch your terms, or compromise somewhere else. So now the real question becomes, what did that lower payment cost you? Because I've seen this play out so many times. Someone puts an extra 40, 60, 80K down to lower their payment by a few $100s. And on paper, it looks like a win. But in reality, they just locked up a huge amount of capital for a relatively small difference every month. And now they have less liquidity, fewer options, less flexibility if something changes. So now ask yourself this: would you rather have a slightly higher payment and significantly more cash on hand with flexibility, or the lowest payment possible but with little room to maneuver? That's the real decision. Let's take it one step further. This is one of the most misunderstood ideas of home buying. If I pay cash, I should. And I get it. No debt sounds clean. Believe me. No interest sounds smart. It feels like you're winning. But here's where people miss it. They only look at what they're eliminating, and they don't always look at what they're giving up. Because when you pay cash for a home, you eliminate your leverage. You eliminate your ability to use that capital elsewhere. So now your money is locked into the property. And yes, you own it free and clear. You can't ignore that. But now ask yourself, what could that money have done instead? So let's talk real numbers for a second. Let's say your mortgage rate is around 6.5%. And let's say over time, your capital could reasonably earn between 7 to 10% in a diversified long-term strategy. Now the conversation changes, because now it's not, do I want debt or no debt? It becomes, where does my money work harder? Inside the house or outside the house? And that spread, that difference between what your money costs you and what your money could earn, that's where real wealth is created. Liquidity is underrated. This is the part that almost nobody talks about. Flexibility. When you put your money into a home, that money becomes illiquid. You can't easily access it, you can't quickly move it, you can't deploy it when the opportunity shows up. And the flexibility matters more than people think because life doesn't stay the same. Things can change. Job situations, business opportunity, market conditions, personal priorities. And when those things change, cash gives you options. Equity does not. Now, that doesn't mean that equity is a bad thing. It just means it's not as flexible. So now you're choosing between lower obligations, meaning lower payment and less debt, or more flexibility, more cash on hand, more optionality. And neither one of those, to be clear, is wrong, but they create very different outcomes. Comfort versus strategy. This is where most buyers lose control of the decision. They optimize for how the decision feels today, not how it's going to play out over time. Because today, the lower payment feels safer, no debt feels better, putting more down feels responsible. But in the long term, that same decision, can limit growth, flexibility, and opportunity. So now the real question becomes, am I optimizing for comfort or am I thinking in strategic terms over the long term? Because sometimes the comfortable decision is not the strategic one, and sometimes the strategic decision requires a little bit more discomfort up front. And this is exactly why I always tell people, do not just go with what feels right, actually run the numbers, understand the trade-offs. It will help you think through your situation, and there's a link in the description. We can walk through it, no pressure, just clarity. The only question that matters. So let's simplify everything. The decision is not FHA versus conventional, 3% down versus 20% down, lower rate versus highest approval. The decision is, what position do I want to be in after I buy this house? Do you want more cash on hand, more flexibility, or lower monthly obligations, more long-term growth potential? Because once you answer that, everything else becomes clear. Why most people get this wrong? Most people never go through this process. They get pre-approved, they get a number, and they move forward. And they assume, if I got approved, it must be fine. But approval is not a strategy. Approval is just a ceiling. And if you don't understand your position, you can end up in a situation where you feel stretched, you lose flexibility, or you regret how you structured things. Not because buying was wrong, but because the decision behind it wasn't thought through. Now, if you want me to run your numbers based on your current situation, there's a link in the description. I'll walk you through your payment, your options, and what position you'd actually like to be in. No pressure, just clarity.